Defining Diabetes is made possible by Dexcom, Omnipod, and Dancing for Diabetes. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before becoming bold with insulin or making any changes to your medical plan. Jenny, what is the glycemic index? How do we explain it?
So, glycemic index, that's an excellent one. So it's essentially a number from 0 to 10 that's assigned to a food, with pure glucose being represented as 100, right? And it represents the relative rise in glucose level within 2 hours after eating or taking that food in. And the index being from 0 to 100, 100 being pure glucose, the higher the food's number, like watermelon. Watermelon has a GI or a glycemic index of 72. So it's close to 100. It's considered a high GI food. The higher the number, the faster and more profound the impact is going to be on blood sugar. The lower the glycemic index, down in less than 55 is considered low glycemic index. Those should have slower, lower impact on blood sugar in the aftermath of eating.
Okay. Are there any foods with carbs that have no impact? Or is that person to person? Because you just ironically said watermelon, which doesn't touch Arden at all.
Well, that may be another definition. It might be glycemic load. That's the difference there.
All right, why don't we combine the two of them? Go ahead. Glycemic load. Keep going.
Okay. So glycemic load is essentially, it takes glycemic index one step further. Glycemic load talks about the amount of food eaten at a time. So let's say you had, a half a cup of watermelon. Despite it having a high glycemic index, the half a cup load amount that you're eating might be very low. And so the impact in the aftermath of eating is also going to be very low. It's the same thing like if you eat a bucket of white rice versus a half a cup of white rice. The glycemic index is the same, but the impact it has on your blood sugar should be lower and less dramatic because you're not eating this gigantic portion of it.
So load is more about amount?
Load is more about amount. So, in terms of like carb impact, carbs are not the enemy. Most of what the problem is, timing of insulin, and then also the amount that people choose to eat at a time. Okay. Right?
In moderation, I guess.
Right.
Most
Correct.
things are manageable. Okay, so I have to try to go through
Correct.
this in my head because I want to make sure I understand, because this is one that's beyond me a little bit. Glycemic index is literally a scoring system. And there are certain foods that fall into certain ranges of index. High, I guess is there a medium and a low? Is that how it is?
Moderate and low. Yep.
And so that is, first of all, I guess, where do they find that? Is that is there like a magic genie that's in charge of the glycemic index? Is that something the government does? Where's that at?
That's interesting. So, and that's one point of, I guess, reference when we talk about glycemic index is the fact that glycemic index was established for foods in a digest alone setting, right? So when they took apples or watermelon or grapes or whatever they were, it was looked at as impact only being digested as that one food. It wasn't like grapes on top of a meat lover's cheese pizza, right? Okay. So, that kind of takes it as a one point in time. This is what the impact and this is what the impact should be. This is what you should expect from this food: fast, moderate, or slow. So
when I tell you to people some foods they punch above their weight, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about glycemic index. It's okay. So I guess that you have I guess there's a way that you would look at a food and maybe apply something to it that you think is true that might not be true, but there's actually a scoring system somewhere called the glycemic index. Maybe I'll try to find a link and put it in here for people. And they can see what these foods are supposed to, how they're supposed to hit. And then from there, glycemic load is the idea of how much of this food you eat and how big of an impact for how long it's going to have.
Correct.
Right. So in a very simplistic way, I used to say to my wife, I never forget the first time, like, we gave Arden a lollipop and we, like, bolused for it, and then realized that she didn't really need the insulin for the lollipop because the sugar, like, hit her really fast, but then it sort of just went away again. I realize now looking back, it didn't go away. She was MDI, and she was probably had too much basal insulin. So,
sure.
Right, yeah. So we were feeding the basal with the lollipop because it felt like it went in and went away. But now I realize that in a perfectly balanced system where Arden's basal is right, that lollipop does have an impact on her. And
would need insulin to cover it.
And would definitely need insulin to cover it. Jenny Smith is not just the delightful voice you hear on the Juicebox Podcast. She's also a real live person with a job, and she works at Integrated Diabetes. If you'd like Jenny to help you in your personal journey with type 1 diabetes, go to integrateddiabetes.com, find Jenny's profile, and send her an email. There's also links right here in the show notes about, how you can do that. I think there's actually even a link there to her email. And there's a brief description of her, bona fides, why it is you might want to give Jenny a ring. Thanks so much to the sponsors, Dexcom, Omnipod, and Dancing for Diabetes. There are links in your show notes at juiceboxpodcast.com where you can find out more about the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor, figure out what's going on at dancingfordiabetes.com, and order a free, no-obligation pod experience kit. That's right, a free, no-obligation demo of the Omnipod. Before I go, I just want to thank everyone who downloaded and shared the show, because the other day it reached 1 million downloads. Absolutely amazing. Took a couple years to get there, but you want to know the exciting part? Because of you guys and how you share the show, I'm pretty certain that 2 million downloads will be here this time next year. Isn't that amazing? Your good words and sharing are how the show grows, so thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Go out, spend the rest of your weekend being bold. Do it with your insulin, do it in your personal life, do it in your professional life. Just be bold. And if you can't remember to be bold, go to juiceboxpodcast.com, scroll down to merchandise, and you can buy a shirt right there that'll remind you. You just look in the mirror and you're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be bold. All right, well, that was weird, but please buy a shirt.